Empire Television, Kern County in Depth with 17's Jim Scott.
And good evening to you. Welcome to this special edition of Kern County in Depth tonight, a debate between the candidates for the 23rd Congressional District of California. GOP incumbent House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy and his Democratic challenger Wendy Reed, a Quartz Hill businesswoman and part-time administrator for the Antelope Valley Conservancy. Now, our candidates have been briefed on the rules of tonight's debate, and by virtue of a coin toss, Congressman McCarthy will go first with opening statements. Congressman?
Well, first I want to thank KGET for having Wendy and I at this debate for this very important job. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the community, for participating in this political process. I'm a fourth-generation Kern County resident, born and raised and educated right here. I met my wife, Judy, in Mrs. Flynn's biology class at Bakersfield High. Our kids, Connor and Megan, also attended BHS. I went to BC, Cal State, got my undergrad, and got my MBA. This community has been very good to our family, and we want to give back. I've been fortunate enough to serve you in the U.S. Congress. I have worked hard on many issues. What I think one of the most important issues we have is water, something that since we've taken the majority, we have passed 5 times. I will not stop fighting until we're able to have more water in our valley and more ability to store it. Secondly, I've worked on education, that the parents could have greater choice, an opportunity where their children go, but the education their children receive. I've also worked on Edwards Air Force Base, China Lake Naval Weapons Center, making sure they're prepared for the 21st century when it comes to defend this nation. Worked on Valley Fever. For the first time, we're having a clinical trial never held before right here in the Valley, just opening up. Most importantly, I want to prepare us for the 21st century, our kids, so we can handle what's before us. I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to a healthy debate on policy and ideas.
Thank you, Congressman. Ms. Reed, opening statement, please.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to KGET for hosting this debate. Thank you, Kevin, for finally showing up to a debate. My name is Wendy Reed, and I'm also very grateful to my husband of 27 years and all the volunteers who have helped with our candidacy. They've helped with this candidacy because 2016 is not about any party versus another party. It's about the corporate influence on our government and getting the big politics and money out of our government. Politics itself appears to be our nation's greatest difficulty, and we need genuine representation to fight for our district. I've been a resident of our district for over 30 years, and in that time, I have engaged citizens in the government processes that affect us, from regional land use planning and water on the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan program to disaster preparedness and climate change preparedness. I will fight hard to bring resources for our infrastructure, because when you're not doing politics and fundraising all the time, you can actually represent your district. In fact, the name of the job is not politician. The name of the job is representative, and that's what I will do.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Our first question has to do with the presidential campaign. Congressman McCarthy, some of your GOP colleagues have distanced themselves from Donald Trump. You continue to support him. Explain to our viewers why.
Well, I see America needs a change. I see that our middle class is worth less today than they were 8 years ago. I see the challenge today and the opportunity are a vote for one or another person. The policies that I fought so hard for this community, when it comes to water, when it comes to veterans, when it comes to economic growth, I need somebody in the White House that will sign those bills. Donald Trump will sign those. When I look at our foreign policy and our standing in America today, we're less than we were 8 years ago. The challenge when it comes to Yemen as a new example, and they're firing missiles at our battleships. Our Libya, a failure. Or a restart with Russia. Those are all decided of a foreign policy from a former Secretary of State, who was Hillary Clinton. When I look at Hillary Clinton receiving a subpoena from the United States Congress to keep her emails, but then going to a company to scrub and bleach them all. Or I just look at what the future holds. Do I want status quo or do I want change? It's not a tough decision.
Ms. Reed, would you like to rebut?
As to whether Mr. McCarthy still supports Donald Trump?
Well, let's talk about your position. You've called yourself a Bernie-crat, but of course Hillary Clinton is the nominee. Do you support the Democratic nominee?
I support much of the Democratic platform, but I believe that both of the parties are deeply flawed. And we see that in their deeply flawed presidential candidates. It is an absolute disgrace that people in America are voting against the other candidate rather than for a candidate that they love. Now, there are many people who are voting for both candidates, and I respect that. In fact, there are three other candidates on the ballot for president, and many of their voters are also voting for me. I am focused on nonpartisan issues that we can all agree on, all the way from the right to the left, which is that this kind of pay-to-play politics that engages itself constantly in fundraising and then representing those who give them campaign contributions has got to go. And a lot of people say that Trump is not a politician, and yet he's been purchasing politicians by his own admission for many decades. I think that's quite political.
So do you support Hillary Clinton? Because she's been accused of some of those things as well.
I'm in my campaign, as I said during the debate here with Mr. Mettler, with Jim Scott, that I am running my own campaign on my own qualifications. I have a master's degree in public administration. I've spent 30 years as a volunteer engaged in our community and engaging citizens in their own self-governance. That is my passion for American democracy and self-governance, and it has been nothing but corrupted by the influence of pay-to-play politics. That is where I stand in my campaign, and neither Trump nor Clinton genuinely represent that perspective, and yet all Americans seem to understand that that's the problem.
You touched on a term here, self-governance. What exactly do you mean by self-governance, Ms. Reed?
Self-governance is the establishment of a civilized society that the people have a say over what happens to them. We have this through voting, and we periodically in our history have this through the political process. But since the rise of television, we have such a huge blossoming of the supposed need for money to be able to run for office. I have run this campaign on barely $30,000, $10,000 of which went straight back to the state and the counties for ballot statements and registration fees. So I have proven in my campaign that you don't need to raise millions of dollars, and you don't need to sell your influence to big donors and satisfy them in order to run for Congress.
Congressman, do you care to rebut that, or should we move on?
I believe the greatest strength of America is the power doesn't rest in Washington. It's with us, the people. We're participating in the political process right now. People have a voice. I also believe at the end of the day, you have to make a decision on who you're going to vote for president, especially if you want to serve in Congress. I think you have to be truthful to the American public on where you stand.
All right, Congressman McCarthy.
May I rebut that?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think that truth is a very important component of whether we have a knowledgeable electorate. Debates are essentially set up for sound bites. We're given 30 seconds, 60 seconds to express ourselves. This is not a representative democracy. When people come to your office, sir, they find the doors locked. When people have tried to talk with you, like the lady I spoke to yesterday from down at Panorama Lane about her husband who was diagnosed with valley fever, you patted her on the shoulder and said, "Good luck with that," and walked off. That is not representing the people in your district. When you say you're fighting for taxpayers, in fact, you're fighting for Goldman Sachs. And that's just not the truth when you say that you are fighting for taxpayers. So I think that that's an important difference between the candidates and how we would address the people's offices and the people's employees that are paid for by our tax dollars.
Congressman, are you aware of what Ms. Reed referred to here?
Not quite. I mean, valley fever, one of the first things I did getting to Congress, I went to visit the CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I went to the National Institute of Health. I talked to both directors, and I got them to come to Bakersfield for the first time ever to have a symposium just on valley fever. Because of that and the work of those before me, from Dr. Hans Einstein or Dr. Tom Larwood. I put together a caucus that we've never had before, from Arizona to here, because that's where the majority of all are. Since then, $8 million has been invested, never before, through Duke University. Now with KMC, we're having the first clinical trials in the history. I would never pat somebody on the back. I'm fighting for them. So we're now having a 72-month trial, never been done before, on the best way to treat it. I look forward to continue this fight till we get a vaccine. That's what I look forward to doing.
Congressman McCarthy, the country is clamoring for an end to the partisan bickering and the political gridlock in Congress. And yet, your colleague, Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who chairs the House Oversight Committee, is promising to ramp up his investigation of Hillary Clinton should she become president, specifically focusing on her tenure as Secretary of State. Chaffetz told the Washington Post this week, quoting here, "We've got 2 years' worth of material already lined up. She has 4 years of history at the State Department, and it ain't good," end quote. The Post wrote that this will raise the specter of more partisan acrimony between the GOP and the White House for the next 4 years, should Hillary Clinton be elected president. Do you support Chairman Chaffetz in this effort?
Look, what I support is that we change this country, that we focus on growth. Growth will solve so many of our problems. Economic. We need to have tax reform, regulation reform. When you look at what we proposed with our ideas and our policy, and that's what elections should be about, we talk about poverty. We've had 5 decades of a war on poverty that have just locked generations into poverty. Our military, the lowest at some points they've ever been since World War II. The world being less safe, rebuilding our military. And yes, repealing and replacing Obamacare. We put our plan out so health care, government won't make the decisions, that you can have a relationship with your own and lower the premiums.
Okay.
That's what I'm working towards, not what Congressman Chaffetz is working towards.
Okay, there's the answer.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Reed, rebuttal?
Yes, the leadership has what Kevin has often referred to as the do-nothing Congress, and they are in disarray. There is an attack underway to take out Paul Ryan from the speakership, and they are not clear. The health care plan that we have now, that they refer to as Obamacare, is essentially the Heritage Foundation plan of private insurance and a free marketplace, and it is self-regulating. The increase in the premiums has been debunked in an article earlier today. When 1 in 7 Californians is actually experiencing hunger, and we have a much higher hospitalization rate in the last week of the month because people are going hungry, removing their food stamps, which includes the food stamps that military families rely on while their family members are in service, you know, it is just not good thinking. You talk about growth, and yet you are constraining every budget so that you can give tax breaks to the very wealthy, and that does not make a recipe for growth.
Let's move on now to the issue of immigration reform. Congressman McCarthy, Donald Trump has been talking a lot about wanting to build a wall to secure the borders. You have said that we've got to secure the border first before Congress moves on with immigration reform, a position that has earned you a lot of criticism from Hispanic leaders in your district. Are your views in alignment with Donald Trump's on the issue of immigration reform?
A lot of people have different views when it comes to immigration. My view is probably a little different than Donald. I believe you have to build trust and you have to secure the border. This was something that was promised in the 1980s, the last time we did immigration reform. But you cannot move forward without securing the borders first. Once you secure the borders, then you move forward with the rest of immigration reform. I think the immigration in America is broken. 40% of everyone that's here illegally came here legally on a visa. We have to reform the visa program. I think it's crazy that when we see a system that someone gets an engineering degree, but we tell them to leave the country. Or it's just the luck of the lottery to come, and then it's chain migration that you bring your whole family. We need to reform the entire structure, but first things first, you secure the border before you do any of the rest.
And Ms. Reed?
Immigration seems to be a reflection of a multi-tiered economic system in America. We cannot forget that we were not the first people here in America. We took the land from Native Americans. We then relied heavily on indentured servants and on slaves to work for no wages at all. We have struggled with human trafficking, with illegal operations that use undocumented workers, from the hotel industry and the building industry to slaughterhouses and, of course, the agricultural industry. And we need to re-look from a systems perspective at how these employment opportunities are working for Americans. As we have close the borders and clamp down on immigration, we now have throughout the Central Valley many orchards and fields that do not have workers. Some people have suggested that we have an employment office at the border instead of a wall. These are issues that we need to address in much more full-fledged ways than just building a wall.
What about amnesty and a path to citizenship, or perhaps the deportation of the millions of undocumented immigrants who are in this country right now? Ms. Reed, which policy do you support?
I think that if an infant child, a small child, has been brought to America and has lived their entire life here, has gone to school here, and even works here, that they should not be torn from their families, and that there needs to be a path to citizenship. Ronald Reagan, your favorite guy, certainly had an amnesty program, and all of the Republican presidents have allowed that when people have proven themselves good Americans, that they should have a path to citizenship. We have a situation now where the deportation is cruel and inhumane in many circumstances, and where even our veterans from our military are being deported simply under the heavy-handed and single-minded us and them policies of the Republican leadership under Kevin McCarthy. I don't believe that that is appropriate or American. No, sir.
Congressman?
The administration carries out those policies. I believe America is the strongest because of the rule of law. If you provide amnesty to everyone, you break the rule of law and you break society down. I don't believe amnesty helps us in any shape or form. I think from a structure of everybody has a rule of ability to go to justice, to go to court, how will you ever take everybody and move them back? I think we need a system that you protect one, secure the border, and then you deal with the rest afterwards.
All right, and let
me just follow up with one more question on immigration. We're getting close to a break here. Donald Trump says he'll stop funding sanctuary cities. Ms. Reed, are you in favor, do you support the idea of sanctuary cities for undocumented immigrants?
I agree that we have laws and they need to be followed. And I'm not sure of the legal background of sanctuary cities and what they're, talking about. I know about sanctuary in a church during a time of war, but I do not know about sanctuary cities, although I've heard the term. I would have to research that before I could arrive at a decision on that. But it does not seem to me, on the other hand, it is the Republican Party that typically wants local, rural, and states' rights. So if you are supporting that as an ideological ideal for good governance, then one would think that if the city wants to go ahead and go against the law, they should. Certainly they have many other policies that affect women's rights and that affect voting rights of people of color and of elderly people, that they need identification from the DMV, even though they're in a nursing home. These are all based on local rights.
Fair enough.
Maybe that's how they defend it.
Congressman, sanctuary cities.
I don't support sanctuary cities.
End of your answer.
That's all it takes.
Okay.
You asked a simple question.
There you go. All right. Well, you are watching a special one-hour edition of Kern County In Depth featuring our candidates for the 23rd Congressional District of California, Wendy Reed and Kevin McCarthy. We're back after the break.
It's the final days of our 97th anniversary sale at Earner's Z's Please Sleep Centers. Check out Sealy Queen Sets starting at $3.99. Get up to $300 in sleep essentials with your Tempur-Pedic mattress set purchase. Buy any Serta mattress set and get your pillows free. Choose up to 36 months interest-free financing and get free same-day delivery. Now through Sunday during the final days of the 97th anniversary sale at both Earners Z's Please Sleep Centers, White Lane and Weibel, and Brimhall and Callaway.
I'm a Carrie.
I'm a Hufflepuff.
I'm a Rachel.
I'm a Ross. Ugh, I'm not a Ross. I'm doing this over.
I'm Single Ladies Beyonce.
I'm Lemonade Beyonce.
Wanna talk?
Yes.
If you have time for this, you have time for this.
Wow, that took no time. What do we do now?
And probably even this.
The highly advanced Audi A4.
Get up to a $5,000 bonus on select 2016 models at Bakersfield Audi, south entrance to the Auto Mall.
There are no rules in my cage tonight, no laws.
Nashville City's got itself an underground alien fight club.
She calls herself Roulette. The Girl of Steel. Tonight, they fight to the death.
Supergirl, all new this Monday at 8, 7 Central on the CW.
And welcome back to our candidates debate with the two people wanting to represent you in the 23rd Congressional District. We have incumbent Representative Kevin McCarthy and his Democratic challenger, Wendy Reed. Well, let's get to the environment here. Environmentalists, many of their Democratic allies and folks who live in the Delta region say protecting endangered fish species comes first and takes priority over the water needs of the agriculture industry. They say farmers in the Central Valley need to make a water consumption correction. Ms. Reed, what do you think about that?
I think that we are the fruit basket of America, and it is inappropriate to reduce the agricultural industries that we have. I do think that our issues with water come from a variety of problems. Number one, being overpopulation of the entire planet and of our region. Number two, doing things in areas that aren't particularly appropriate for those areas. Number three, climate change, and the drought is not just a temporary thing. So I think that we need to incentivize and bring resources from the federal government to incentivize the kinds of improvements that we can make to the agricultural industries, our oil industries, our ecotourism, and the transportation that's necessary there. There are many things that we can be doing differently. Some of those are sequestering the methane coming off of agricultural processes, doing things in greenhouses where you can actually reuse and recycle the water, and doing things more safely and with a modern technology. If we approach it like we approach the space program, we can do a lot better.
And Congressman McCarthy, rebuttal?
Oh, rebuttal. I think water is the top issue when it comes to the valley. You've watched for the last 30 years, we've not built a new dam, but California continues to grow. Our snowpack is in the north, the Central Valley is where we grow the food for the world, and Southern California is where the population is. But if you do not pump the water through the delta, no one gets it. Or it goes right out to the ocean and you lose it. So we need to do three things. One, we need greater storage. And the greatest return on the investment is take the current dams we have and raise them. Best return. Second, we have to pick people over fish. Right now, that's not happening. Fish are being chosen over people. We have to be able to move the water down. Thirdly, I think, yes, we can continue to conserve, but we cannot conserve our way out of this problem. But this is something that for 5 times we passed in the House. The Senate has never passed it once. I'm hopeful when we go back in November 14th that we'll be able to move this bill inside the WRDA bill and have it done once and for all.
Some critics of agriculture argue that we should take millions of acres of farmland out of production on the valley's west side. which relies heavily on surface water from the Delta. And they argue that that, in and of itself, would solve the water crisis in California. Ms. Reed, do you subscribe to that point of view? You touched on it earlier. Is that something you agree with or disagree with?
Let me say that I think that when agriculture is feeding people, it is from a people perspective, if you put people over all other creatures on the planet, then obviously feeding people is incredibly important. Much of the agriculture that we do is not necessarily for feeding people, and we perhaps can reorient ourselves from a high meat diet to a more vegetable diet that would reduce the amount of water that is used and the amount of carbon dioxide that is emitted and methane that is emitted in the overall system. We grow a lot of alfalfa with water that is exported. So I think that our trade policies need to be looked at. My opponent here likes the idea of exporting oil to other countries and bringing oil from other countries through our watersheds and exporting it out through the Gulf. There's a lot of exportation of agriculture that doesn't put people first, it puts corporate profits first.
Congressman, care to rebut?
Yes. If you take it out of plantation, of the service, you end economic growth in the valley. People are then out of work. If you then are not growing the food is coming from somewhere else. They do not have the same standards of America, so we do not know about our food security. Then we have an economic problem, so Kern County goes down in value. The one thing that Wendy did say that I agree with, yes, I do support, and I fought. And for the first time in 40 years, we lifted the oil export ban. Why? Because Kern County produces more oil than any other county in the 48 states. So what I want to do is, I want to keep people working. I just read the headlines where ERA is having to lay people off because the price is lower. I want people to work in this valley. I want more water so we could plant more in this valley, because I know we can feed not just America but the world, and to do that we are going to have to export our food, which is going to create more jobs, more value, and more kids going to college.
All right.
May I rebut or speak further to that point,
Go
please?
ahead.
I think that there are a couple of different things that Kevin has touched upon here. And what we have not spoken about is the fact that we're not just talking about some fish. We are talking about a keystone species in the functioning ecosystem of our oceans. The exportation of oil and the transport of that oil, not only on oil trains through our communities, but also on tankers across the ocean, is not an environmentally sound concept. And it certainly isn't good for American domestic security and security of our oil supplies from our reserves. We need to focus on that and position Kern County for good tax revenue and for good oil implementation into the future, and not just be selling it off to Japan and China and wasting it. We are already importing all kinds of things that use all kinds of oil in transport coming over from China, and those are not the solutions to having local production of food and community security of food. It's all about profits. It's not really about feeding people, Kevin.
I'm not quite sure what she meant there. I mean, what I look is the supply and demand. If the price of oil drops and you can't sell more of it, you produce less of it and you lay people off, like what's happening in Kern County today. I talked to Kevin Small at KSI. Place that had 7,000 employees, now at 2,000. For 40 years, when Democrats are in the majority and Republicans majority, they put this in the 1970s, back when we used to ration whether you can even get gasoline. We lifted that oil export ban so the free market could actually work. And with that free market, America will get stronger and become energy independent. So we will not be dependent on other countries for oil. So we will not be dependent and fund our enemies. I think that makes not only Kern County stronger, but makes America stronger.
If memory serves me correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that I read once that America produces enough oil to get us through a single day in our nation. Where, if we don't import oil, through tankers from the Middle East, where would you get the oil to power our economy, Ms. Reed?
Well, what we're talking about here is exporting Kern County oil. We're not talking about importing oil from the Middle East.
I thought you said something about it's wrong for our planet to be exporting or bringing oil to this country through
exporting
tankers?
oil to sell overseas, and Kevin nodded his head, okay, that's exactly what he wants to do.
I see.
And that's exactly what they want to do for the Bakken oil fields coming out of Canada and bring it down through our Great Lakes region. That's why the Native American tribes and nations are grouped in Dakota right now, protesting the DAPL. We don't believe that environmentally it is sound to take dirty oil sands out of Canada to begin with. We need to be using the relatively cleaner oil supplies that we have in Kern. We have the third largest oil reserves in the nation: Alaska, Texas, and California, most of which is in Kern. We can position ourselves into the future. We can actually, and I have campaigned on building an environmentally sound refinery. We know we can do that because when the EPA has charged companies with polluting, they have required them to upgrade their facilities to be in environmental compliance. We can do that, and we can position Kern County for much better tax revenues to fund the public services that Kern County residents deserve.
All right. Let me ask you this. We'll start with you, Ms. Reed. Are you in favor of the environmental call to ban hydraulic fracturing of oil wells?
That is on the Democratic platform of the state of California. The Democratic national platform calls for domestic production for the purpose of national security. I am deeply concerned that under the Bush-Cheney administration, Cheney exempted himself from the Clean Water Act. And Mr. McCarthy recently, I read in the Bakersfield Californian, had worked to try to chip away at the Clean Water Act. Our drinking water supplies are much more important to us even than food. We can go without food for a lot longer than we can go without drinking water. And so since we don't know what these chemicals are, I think that we really need to reverse that very ill-thought legislation and exempting fracking from the Clean Water Act and from public knowledge of what chemicals are being used and what the impacts are on the groundwater. I think that public information is the blood of a free society, and without it, I don't see how we have self-representation anymore. We have kings that tell us what they want us to know.
Congressman McCarthy, the calls to ban fracking, what do you think?
Look, I want to make sure that we have a safe drinking water. We have been fracking for decades. It is the lifeblood that allows us, from the standpoint, not to bring more oil over on tankers from the Middle East, but actually develop the fields here in America. Fracking works, and it helps. I think we need to have strong regulations as we move through it. We need to maintain our ability to frack. If we do not have the ability to frack, our oil wells will dry up. Our jobs will dry up. Just as we've watched the price drop and people be laid off, this is only more punishment for Kern County.
And Congressman McCarthy, do you reject the assertion that climate change is occurring and that the burning of fossil fuels is the primary cause of it? What are your thoughts on that?
No, there's climate change. I watched my entire life from the standpoint back when we were going to have this ice age on the cover of Time magazine. The debate is of what's the cause of it. I think the Earth does change in climate. We've watched from being iced over and not. I also think we have to continue to look that we want to have cleaner air, but we have to be able to achieve that in the science-based that we can live with. I have a frustration when people do not use science-based in any of the legislation of where they go or their decision-making process when it comes to regulations.
And Ms. Reed, your thoughts on the climate change and the burning of fossil fuels and what role it possibly plays in that?
There is no debate other than political debate, and it is political debate because they are the companies that are funding the campaign contributions. There is no doubt that the burning of fossil fuel contributes more greenhouse gases, specifically carbon dioxide, to the atmosphere, to the ocean, and to the green plants on our planet. Anybody who has taken Geology 101 at Cal State Bakersfield or Bakersfield College, Earth Science even grade grade 3 earth science can understand the process of carbon dioxide and oxygen. And once you dig up fossil fuels, which are adding to that closed system of our planet, there's no doubt about it. Kevin likes to say science-based that we can live with. Science is not subject to human beings' opinions and whether we can live with it or not. The fact is, we cannot live with it. We are watching massive flooding. We are suffering a drought here in California, and we need to take a World War II-style effort, a space program effort to address climate change. It will make jobs, and it will solve the problems we're talking about here tonight.
Okay.
If we just acknowledge it and face it like adults.
All right, and Congressman, you'd like to respond?
Yes. Our own government did a study on greenhouse gases in America, because as we go around the world and the president tries to come to an agreement to see. In the height of the growth of drilling in America was 2006 to 2015. America lowered their greenhouse gases, more so than every other country combined. So we are doing our job at the same time having economic growth, at the same time giving America energy security on our path to be energy independent. This is where the argument lies. Can we have economic growth and a safe environment at the same time? I say yes, if you have common sense and science.
May I rebut?
Briefly, please.
Briefly.
We're going to move on.
15, 20 seconds. The young people of America understand that growth is just not sustainable, that we are already seeing young people unable to move out of their homes because our economy has stagnated, unable to even know whether they can afford to get married and have children. We need to make an economy of opportunity, and that is by facing the science-based facts about climate change and using those for an economic growth that is a sustainable America.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reed. Kern County and the Antelope Valley have rich aviation histories. They're both hotbeds for aerospace research and development. That's probably no secret to either of you. Your vision for the emerging commercial space flight and space tourism industry that is part of Kern County's economy today. Let me start with you first, Congressman McCarthy.
To me, this is the hidden jewel of Kern County. Most people don't realize eastern Kern County, the 2508 airspace, is probably the greatest asset America has. From Edwards to Plant 42 to China Lake. But right in the middle there is a private entity, Mojave Airport. We've watched so many times. If you come to Washington, you walk in to Air and Space, from the Voyager to Spaceship One to others. Kern County has left its mark greater than anybody else, but it's happening right there.
How do we grow this industry is my question.
That is a great question. And just a fact, this is something that I've worked a great deal on. Just this year, I've had a bill signed into law, the Space Act. What it does, it protects those who are making the investment for commercial space. Because the lower orbit is where government's not playing, where private entity can. But we don't know a lot about it. The more regulation that we put on it could harm the ability to grow with it. But we also want to put protections. That's what we were able to do in the Space Act. We also see that the investment that people are making, and what will happen is that will lower the cost to our cell phones. That will speed up travel to where we can go before. And then you even have an Elon Musk if you desire to go to live on Mars. We are making a whole new approach that we've never had, and it's happening right here in Mojave. But that is why I put the Space Act together. We now have private property rights all the way to space. It's one of our greatest strengths.
Ms. Reed, your reflections on the emerging commercial space flight and space tourism industry.
I am so proud of our aerospace programs and our bases within our district. Plant 42 is actually in Los Angeles County, which is a part of our district, as is a portion of Tulare County. Skunk Works came up from Burbank, which was also LA County, and that's part of our 23rd Congressional District. The opportunities that the space program provided for America is the Star Trek communicators we all carry in our pockets are a result of that program. The small emergency blankets, smaller than a deck of cards. We are the premier aerospace builders of the galaxy. We need to protect our surrounding areas and not put tall buildings or even residential structures in those areas. We have fought very, very hard around the bases, including Plant 42, to prevent that kind of counterproductive development. I have met with the leaders of the bases as well as the Mojave Spaceport, and I have assured them that I will do everything, if not more, to support the programs. And we have the F-35, which is an incredible program and is going to bring a lot of employment and resources. It's not only a military and very important airplane, but it is also a commercial export that we will be selling to other countries.
All right. Well, thank you both. We need to take a break, but our 23rd Congressional District candidates debate here on Kern County In Depth will continue right after this.
It's spooky at Bill Wright Toyota during our huge October sales event. Get absolutely scary deals on every car, truck, and SUV. Take advantage of a shocking lease on a 2016 Corolla for only $154 per month, or get a spine-chilling $198 per month lease on a 2017 Camry, or jump on 0% financing up to 72 months plus $500 subvention cash on the Camry of your choice. A frightening good deal is waiting for you at Bill Wright Toyota. Doing it right for 46 years and still doing it right. Toyota, let's go places.
The Dust Bowl brought a generation of great-grandparents here. Their children built California's water system, and with hard work, turned water into jobs, our livelihoods. Now, our generation must protect, store, and conserve that resource. That's my job, our job. Together, we will get it done.
It sounds like a sports car. Feels like a sports car. Drives like a sports car. And as made evident by the crest, it is a sports car. Introducing the new Porsche Macan. For those who believe every car should be a sports car.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to Today. It is Halloween.
Our costume reveal is going to be epic.
If you're in the neighborhood, come on down to the plaza and join the fun.
Oh, watch it, buddy.
We're ready for the big reveal.
Monday's #1 new drama goes to the Alamo.
That's David Crockett.
Ma'am. And the future of America.
There's one thing everybody knows about the Alamo. Everybody dies.
Rests in her hands.
We need to fix history.
Timeless. New Monday after The Voice on NBC.
And welcome back to this special one-hour edition of Kern County In Depth, featuring the candidates for California's 23rd Congressional District, Wendy Reed and Kevin McCarthy. Let's turn to health care here momentarily, if we could. There's been a lot of talk in this presidential campaign about repealing the Affordable Care Act. Premiums are starting to go up substantially, sometimes twofold, 200% in some rural states, less in others. The Department of Health and Human Services announced on Monday that premiums will go up on average by 25% next year. Should Obamacare be repealed? Let's start with you, Congressman.
Yes, it should be repealed, and I've voted to repeal it numerous times. Why? Because it's collapsing on itself. The promises the president made, if you like your health care, you can keep it. Well, we know that's a lie. He said your premiums would go down. Well, we found year over year that's a lie. People today, even in Arizona, more than 100% increase. But your deductibles are even higher. They created in Obamacare 23 co-ops, and they provided $2 billion in taxpayer funding. As of today, 16 of those co-ops have failed. This is collapsing upon itself. This isn't providing better health care.
If I may follow up.
Yes.
Does it make sense to repeal the entire Affordable Care Act, or to attack it at its weakest points and retool it, if you will?
I don't see how it sustains itself. It's being subsidized today. It's a government-funded program. You're taking away the relationship from the doctor and the patient. It is not lowering the cost, so you have to have a different philosophical approach. And if I may, people who go to buy how they watch television, different cable packages, they have a lot of choice. But they have choices from within, not even who they buy from. Do you want a sports package? Do you want to have HBO or others? You're allowing the individual to decide that. Today, we don't get that. You have the opportunity to look at what type of health care. Judy and I want different type of health care today than when we were younger and going to have children, or we needed braces. Let us have the choice. Let us make the competition where there's more people involved. Not only are the premiums going up, but there's some states that only have one option. So you have less choice in the whole program. Government is making the decisions. I think that's wrong. That's why you have to pull it all up and start anew.
Ms. Reed, repeal Obamacare or not?
Absolutely not. What a waste of taxpayer money to spend 67 times trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act implemented some very important corrections to an irresponsible free market run for greed. It ensured that people with pre-existing conditions would still get coverage. The marketplace that we're talking about is a free market. It is not government operated. Yes, there are subsidies. It's not just big oil companies and Verizon that get government subsidies. The real people of our country deserve subsidies when it comes to their health and their welfare. That's the job of Congress as established by the Constitution. Additionally, the only reason that the premiums are going up in some of those states that you cited is because they were so angry at the president trying to fix our terrible uninsured problem where we had hundreds of thousands of people going into the emergency rooms because they didn't have insurance coverage. And the way that they expressed their anger at the president was to not adopt Medicare and expansions of Medicare. That's where the premiums are going up. The premiums that are going up are a normal market rate, and the subsidies are going up to balance them. That same woman whose husband has valley fever told me her story. I'm out of time to tell it to you, but she is incredibly grateful for the Affordable Care Act that came just in the nick of time so that she could get her family back on medical coverage.
All right, let's turn now to the issue of Homeland Security. How should the U.S. proceed with the processing of immigrants and refugees from the Middle East who are seeking entry into this country? Congressman McCarthy, your party's presidential nominee, has promised to deport some 12,000 Syrian refugees already in the United States and would halt immigration from Syria and other Middle Eastern countries with ties to terror. He's even proposed a ban on Muslim immigrants trying to enter this country. Are you in agreement with that position?
No, I believe you need to secure America, and let me tell you my ideas for it. After what took place in Paris and San Bernardino, I created a caucus inside of Congress. I happen to be the chairman of counterterrorism and Homeland Security. What we have is called Visa Waiver Program. We do it with 37 other countries. These countries, if you live in them, you can come to America without even getting a visa and be here for 90 days. Many of those people in the country, if you check, have been to Syria and have been fighting. We changed that. We need to know who's coming into our country. The first thing that should have happened is what I proposed years ago, a no-fly zone. The worst thing that you could have happen is move the people out of Syria into another country. Because when this conflict ends, you need people there for the economy, people there to run the government. We should have found a safe haven area. It actually costs less to make sure this war didn't continue. So they could be there in their own country. It's what they desire most.
And Ms. Reed, your thoughts on this?
Wow, what a loaded answer that is to rebut. The greatest terrorism that has happened in America was done at the Murrah Building in Oak City by a guy that looked a lot like you. We have a lot of homegrown terrorism and a lot of threat of homegrown terrorism because of the political riling up of all of this us and them. One of the main reasons we have the problem with Syria is because of the Bush-Cheney administration and our very faulty invasion of Iraq. For what both of the presidential candidates have called business opportunities. This has all got to stop. America and our values, our conservative values, are that we love our neighbor. We should approach these other countries with diplomacy and with help and support and cooperation, and not use our military to assert imperialistic takeover of other indigenous people's resources. That is where we started in America, taking over the whole country from indigenous people, and we've continued that around the world. It's not sustainable, and we have to stop.
Ms. Reed, you got a little off track there. The question was really, what do we do with the refugees and immigrants who want to come into this country from Middle Eastern countries? That was the question.
Most of the people that are coming from the Middle East are incredibly wonderful people who are escaping war, just as our ancestors did. I doubt that Mr. McCarthy is a Native American. I imagine that as my ancestors did, and my husband's ancestor came on the Mayflower, my ancestors came as immigrants in the 1800s. My grandmother on my mother's side came to escape war. That is what these people are doing. And it is just as inappropriate to paint them with a broad brush as it is any other group, whether it be by gender, by color, by national origin, by ability or disability. These are prevented under the federal laws of our great United States, and it is entirely inappropriate.
So you don't think that they should be vetted for any possible ties to terrorist organizations?
Oh, of course.
Well,
of course,
that
and
was
so
the question.
should our own Americans.
That's the question.
We know we are watching. Our own FBI is
Congressman?
watching domestic terrorists the same way.
Congressman, rebuttal?
You can't put a wave across someone based upon religion or color of skin. But when it comes to what is happening in the world in Iraq and Syria, and the idea that they do not have passports, I think the country has a responsibility to protect their homeland. So you have to screen these individuals before you allow them come in. But what's more importantly, these individuals don't want to have to leave their country. We should have had a no-fly zone. This is where the president put a red line but let people pass it and never did anything about it. Where he had a restart with Russia, and now Putin is back in the Middle East when Russia had left in the 70s. This is a lack of foreign policy. We should have put a safe haven in the region so they could be there until the war has ended and they could come back to their homes and run their own country. That is the best answer for them. That is the best opportunity.
One more question regarding the war overseas right now. Would either of you support the next president if he or she called for putting more U.S. boots on the ground, regular troops on the ground in the fight against ISIS? Ms. Reed, let me start with you.
That's a very, very hard question. It really would depend on the specific situation and what those boots were going to do. We have seen boots in Afghanistan, and these are not boots. Let's be very clear. I hate that I adopted your language on that. These are real men and women who are already suffering under a broken Veterans Administration system that Mr. McCarthy and his leadership tried to defund and slash their budget. Whether it is appropriate in a given situation has to be looked at under that situation. We cannot simply blindly continue to bomb countries. Kevin wants to talk about that the Syrians should stay in Syria. If he had any knowledge of what the Syrians are undergoing, it is apocalyptic there. And of course they're trying to leave their country. If Bush and Cheney, under their administration and
So
under their Secretary of State, wanted to make a Syria that was safe for them, they should have done so.
You're backtracking back against the answer.
I've let a lot of
Okay, and I do believe I said regular troops. I did say boots on the ground, and then U.S. troops on the ground.
But may everybody, I've let a lot of these things that are said that are just untrue. First of all, the VA is funded at a higher level than it's ever had under a Republican majority. I have spent too much time working for our veterans, and I will never stop, and I will not let someone say something that's not true. My answer was to have a no-fly zone so we would not have the chaos or the barrel bombing from Russia that we have today that forces people to leave Syria and disrupt the Europe and America. Secondly, I said not to keep them in Syria, but to keep them in the region so they could come back home. Now, your question that was would we put troops on the ground? That's the hardest decision you'll ever be asked as a federal elected official. I had to face that with the surge. I would never take a hypothetical. The administration came to ask, I didn't tell them where I stood. I let people from all sides, all opinions to come tell me. The first thing I want to know, one, is what our goal is. because I want to know that we could achieve it and when we could achieve it to leave. Second, I want to make sure our men and women are not hands strapped behind their back, that they're going to be protected, that we're going to use everything in our power to make this over as fast, as quick as possible.
All right,
so achieve the goal. And that's when I'd make my decision.
All right, we have just about a minute left, and we want to give you time for closing statements. Ms. Reed, you stated on your website it's time to vote out representatives, and you also referred to it to sell their influence for campaign contributions. You repeatedly say you are not for sale. Are you suggesting that your opponent is for sale?
Yes, I am, and I deeply regret it. I would not have entered this race if I did not believe that this is one of the major crises of American democracy. Mr. McCarthy has accepted and has spent the past couple of weeks going on record as saying that he's doling out $23 million to House representatives for candidates and incumbents in 75 cities in 29 different states, and he said our members, his House members, are always his top priority. He didn't say they're his top priority at election season. He said they're always his top priority. And the reason this came to my attention is because we who are the people in your district have well understood this for many years, that you're not representing us, sir.
We're just about to closing statements. Excuse me, Ms. Reed. Briefly, a quick rebuttal. 15 seconds, sir.
We are never going to get water in the valley if Speaker Pelosi is the Speaker. When I went into office, she was the Speaker, and we could never get a water bill passed. So yes, I spend my time going across the country, found people that believed in smaller government, believed in creating a business and opportunity, and I'll never back away from that fact. I play within the rules, and from one standpoint, I want this valley to change. This is my priority, and I'm going to fight to make that happen.
All right, we're at closing statements. Congressman McCarthy, you're first.
I thank you for the opportunity to listen tonight. I thank you for the opportunity to serve. And I don't want you to leave tonight without personally asking you for your vote this November 8th. I would be honored to serve and finish the job. One thing my parents have taught me, you don't quit until the job's done. I've worked hard on water, and I'm going to finish it. When it comes to valley fever from the very first time, but our veterans, when I first went to Washington, I heard of what was going on in the VA. So I requested the audit along with others, and we found the problems. But you know what? We were able to pass the Choice Act, and that was the first start. Or when I just listened the other day and found in the LA Times our National Guard being treated. I didn't wait to go back to Congress. I got on the phone right then, put it together, talked to the Undersecretary, and I used it in a bipartisan manner, put everybody together to change that. How we treat our veterans shows the character of this country, and I will never allow them to be treated the way they have been. If you allow me to have 2 more years, I will continue to work on the values of Kern County, of what we need to have happen and change this country.
Ms. Reed.
I want to thank you again for the opportunity to debate at last. Mr. McCarthy says that he plays within the rules, but these are rules that have been changed under his leadership. He says he represents taxpayers when he has fiercely defended the carried interest loophole, which really only benefits entities like Goldman Sachs, who happen to be his top contributors. The corporate tax rate is not something which is hard. It is the actual tax rate is much lower than other countries. When we talk about veterans, I have traveled and spoken to many veterans in many VFWs, and there are all kinds of information technologies that need improvement. We want genuine services for veterans, not just lip service. In fact, Mr. McCarthy and Congress were told about the National Guard refurbishments 2 years ago and did nothing until it got into the news. I am honest, I don't lie, cheat, or steal, and you'll always have genuine representation if you elect me. I hope to earn your trust and your vote.
All right. Well, that concludes our debate between the 2 candidates for California's 23rd Congressional District, Wendy Reed and Kevin McCarthy. Our purpose is quite simple here, to help you make an informed decision when you go to the polls on November 8th. Candidates, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For Tammy Melchak, I'm Jim Scott. Thanks for being with us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Good night.
Save up to $750 on orthodontics at Capital Dental Group. And all patients starting orthodontic treatment will be entered into our weekly drawings for a chance to win awesome prizes. Only at Capital Dental Group. 661-861-8000.